Hi Jets families, it's Karen Kilps, the school counselor. Thank you for joining me today as we talk all about positive discipline. Discipline and behaviors in our kids is something that all parents and caregivers deal with, and it can be some of the most difficult parts of parenting. And so that's why I thought this would be a good topic to cover today, to hopefully give some more insight and some tips and some strategies about how to make discipline a little bit more of a positive experience in your homes. Before we get started, it's important to know that discipline is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every child is different, every family dynamic is different, and so just keep that in mind as we go forward in this presentation today. So again, I hope to provide some tips and strategies that might give you a few more extra tools in your toolbox as you consider discipline in your home. And so with that said, let's go ahead and get started. When thinking about discipline, many people simply think about punishment for misbehavior. And although consequences are an important part and a big part of discipline, there's definitely more to it than that. And I want to start today by just talking about the importance of being proactive in our disciplines and in our approach before the misbehavior even occurs. So what I mean by that is before misbehavior happens, we want to be building those deep relationships with our kids, those close connected relationships, and that's something that we talked about last month, and that relationship building. When we are connected with our children, we have that bond. There's that understanding then on their part that mom or dad or grandma, grandpa, or whoever's taking care of me, they're for me, and they love me, and they have my best interest. And so discipline goes a lot further when that relationship is close and already established. The next part of being proactive is working with your child to build those self-regulation skills and then modeling them in your own life. Many poor behavior choices occur when a child is dysregulated, meaning that their emotions have gotten so big that they are out of control. When we help to provide some of those coping strategies for them, those calming tools, it allows them to be more in control of their emotions and to know how to manage their emotions when they get big so that they don't lose control, so they can kind of catch it before anything hurtful or harmful happens. So some examples of helpful self-regulation strategies might include taking deep breaths, counting to 10, naming your emotions, things like that can just help to kind of bring them from maybe a 9 or a 10 down to like a 4 or 5 as far as their levels of control. So, and then it's important as the caregiver to be modeling self-regulation in your own life so that they can see how it's done. It shows them that while we all have emotions, it's also important to not, in our emotions, lose control to the point where we are hurtful or harmful in the words that we say, in our actions. And when we can show self-regulation in our own life, it shows them that this is possible, it shows them how to do it, and it allows, again, for the experience of discipline to feel a little bit more positive for everyone. The next one is providing opportunities for your child to make their own decisions. So at times, some misbehavior can occur because your child is trying to exert some control over their own life or their own environment. So a great preventative way to combat this is by offering your child some limited choices. This gives them some agency in their lives. And as they get older, it's more and more important to give them more and more of these opportunities. For example, your child can choose, do you want to have your snack before or after you finish your homework, or would you like to have beans or carrots? So, these are small things, and as they get older, we can give them more choices. But again, allowing them those age-appropriate decisions can help to give them that greater sense of control of their own life, which is something that can help them to be more willing to work in partnership with you over various areas that may come up in your household. And then finally, another way of being proactive is setting that culture of consistency. Consistency, the importance of that can't be stressed enough. We learn through repetition, and when we follow through on the things that we say we are going to do, that gives our kids the greatest opportunity for learning. So if we say, if you do ABC behavior, then the consequences will be X, then we're going to do that. So they learn that in the future, if they're tempted to do that again, they know, oh, I don't want to because I don't want to have that consequence again. So they can't learn that unless there's consistency shown first. So that's a really important part also of being proactive in discipline. All right, when thinking about discipline, sometimes people think about punishment, and sometimes the terms discipline and punishment are used interchangeably. But I want us to talk a little bit about the difference between these two things. So our word discipline comes from the Latin word, I think it's disciplina, but that essentially means teaching or learning. So discipline is all about teaching, or all about our kids learning appropriate behaviors, skills for managing their behaviors, what's okay, what's not okay, things like that. Discipline can be negative or it can be positive. With positive discipline, you are teaching your child correct behaviors, how to make better choices to prevent misbehaviors in the future. It provides guidance, it focuses on prevention, it enhances communication, models respect, embraces natural consequences, it teaches fairness, responsibility, life skills, and problem solving. These are all things that are going to be useful in our children's lives now and as they grow. So it includes catching kids being good, on encouraging that behavior that we want to see more of. Also modeling, again, showing through our example. Positive discipline is not a process. It is a process. It's not a single act. So children are held responsible for misbehavior, but their consequences are meaningful and they are related to the behavior. Let's talk now about punishment. So punishment is a form of negative discipline. It comes from the Latin word punire, which means to cause pain. Punishment is also often used to get rid of or end behavior. It's an entirely negative consequence in relation to a child's action. And a punishment may stop a behavior in the moment, but it doesn't necessarily teach your child skills for doing better in the future. Punishment is a penalty for wrong behavior. So it might include physical punishment, such as spanking. It might be psychological, such as isolation, shaming, disapproval. Punishment often focuses on a past misbehavior, but it does nothing to help a child behave better in the future. Now I feel like I want to give a disclaimer. I'm not saying that discipline should be an entirely positive experience for your child. There can still be negative consequences for their wrong or misbehaviors, but there should be a clear learning moment in a negative consequence. And now before we go any further in this presentation, I do want you to think back on your own childhood and in the way that you were disciplined or possibly punished when you were growing up. What did your caregivers do? What did your parents do when you misbehaved? Would you say that you were disciplined? Did you learn skills for doing better in the future? Or would you say that you were punished, where you did you just experience painful consequences as a result of your actions? We often parent in the way that we were parented. And sometimes that's a really good thing. If our parents really gave us a great example or taught us a lot through our own mistakes or misbehaviors. But sometimes if we parent that same way that we were parented, it might involve continuing harmful cycles that weren't as effective. Or what worked with us isn't necessarily working with our children. And so sometimes it's helpful to just get some new ideas about what might be possible. So self-reflection here is really helpful because it helps us to be more intentional on and more purposeful on how we approach discipline with our kids. And I thought this quote was really helpful as it related to the discipline versus punishment. So discipline is helping a child solve a problem. Punishment is making a child suffer for having a problem. To raise problem solvers, focus on solutions, not retributions. Okay, so if you haven't been able to tell, I am a bigger fan of discipline over punishment. I feel that disciplining our kids now will lead to their own self-discipline in the future. And as parents and caregivers, our goal is to kind of work ourselves out of a job. So if we can take and make the most of these opportunities as they're young, with discipline, with teaching, helping to build some of those skills for doing better in the future, then that is going to help us work ourselves out of that job. So there are 4 major types of discipline that we are going to talk about today, and you may try one of these, or it might be the most effective to kind of use a mixture of them. But the 4 we're talking about today include boundary-based discipline, empathic discipline, behavior modification, and gentle discipline. So those are the 4. Let's start with the first one. With boundary-based discipline, this involves establishing a set of rules, and then your child has a choice to either obey the rules or to face consequences. So how does this work in the real world? You might have a child who refuses to clean up the room, to clean up their toys. So to deal with this using boundary-based discipline, you would set up a rule that your child must comply with, or there will be a consequence if they don't. So in this case, you could say, if you don't clean up your toys, then you can't watch TV after dinner. This lays out a clear choice for your child that they can do or not do what you're asking, but if they don't do it, then there's going to be a consequence for it. And for your school-age kids, you might even invite them into this process. You can, ahead of time, set up what some of the consequences might be if they don't follow through on what you as a parent or caregiver has established as a rule. So, for example, you might come to an agreement that if they backtalk you or are disrespectful, that they'll lose their phone privileges for a set amount of time. Or you can relate the consequence to the misbehavior. If they are hurtful in their words, then they need to restore that relationship by saying something that's a little bit more caring or kind, something that shares what they appreciate about you or something they're thankful for about you. So it can be related to the misbehavior. But when we invite our kids into this process, especially even of coming up with the consequences, then they feel a little bit more ownership in their behavior. And then we're not necessarily seen as the bad guy or the bad girl, in this scenario. We're not the one that's inflicting this negative consequence on them. That's something that they already agreed to ahead of time. And so that can also help protect the relationship between parent and child. So using boundary-based discipline helps our kids to learn that skill of recognizing that our choices have consequences. And this is something that will be useful for them throughout their lives, realizing that their different behaviors, their different actions lead to various consequences. It can be very beneficial. Okay, the next one is empathic discipline. Using empathic discipline involves trying to identify and understand your child's feelings in the moment and then coming alongside them and showing them that you are on the same team with them. So at its core is the theory that both parents and children are free to experience any range of emotions. So we're not telling our children how they should or shouldn't feel in a particular moment. Instead, the parent or caregiver makes observations about their child, makes connections between their behavior and their emotions that might be kind of beneath their behavior. So imagine that you have a child who maybe is failing a class at school because they have not been turning in their homework assignments. So an empathic discipline approach might involve acknowledging that maybe your child is feeling overwhelmed or stressed because there's so much work and they don't know where to start, or maybe they're really struggling in that class and they don't understand the material. There's a lot of reasons why they may not be doing their homework or may not be turning it in. And so when we take a time to try to imagine what they're feeling, what they're going through, it shows them again that we're on their team and we're here to help them, and we care about how they're feeling, and we care about helping them do better. So we might share, I see that you're feeling stressed. I see that you're feeling overwhelmed. What can we do to make this more manageable for you? Let's talk about some strategies, or we can break this up into smaller chunks. But now we're giving them a skill, and we're coming alongside of them. We're helping to identify an emotion, and we're also helping them to learn some strategies for doing better, or for getting something done, for essentially getting the behavior that we want to see. But instead of punishing them for not doing it, we're seeing maybe what's kind of causing this in the first place, and then building the skill from there. All right, let's move on to the next one, behavior modification. So this is praising good behavior and ignoring the bad behavior, or reinforcing the good behavior and not reinforcing the bad behavior. So again, with a child, maybe if they're not cleaning up their toys or they're not cleaning up their room, you can remind them, if you clean up your toys, we're going to go to the park this afternoon. If they decide to clean their toys up, then they get to go to the park. If they don't clean them up, well, they just don't get to go. And so you're praising that good behavior. You're kind of rewarding it by going to the park. And if they don't do that, they just simply don't get to go. So when they respond with that negative behavior or refuse to do the thing that you ask, they just don't get to do the thing that you had maybe set ahead of time. And I will say there's a time and place for this approach. We can't always ignore bad behavior if they're doing something unsafe, if you are out in public and they are causing great disruption. That can't be ignored. So this might be a form of discipline that's best used at home, and this is the kind of discipline where you involve like choosing your battles. If it's something that's not a big issue, then yeah, you can just ignore it, but then they just don't get that kind of that reinforcement, that positive thing that would come from following the rule. So with this approach, children start to learn that following directions leads to positive consequences, and not following directions can lead to negative consequences. And then finally, gentle discipline. This relies on redirection, and it's most useful in the moments of bad behavior. This can be especially effective for younger children who have not necessarily learned that relationship between their actions and the behaviors and their consequences. So if your child was, again, having a fit, having a tantrum because they don't want to clean up, they want to keep playing, or you maybe have a teen that has laundry all over the room and dirty dishes stacking up, and you really want them to clean it up, but they don't want to. You could, with the younger kid, you can make it a game. Like, let's see who can get this done quicker. Or with your older kid, can we just set a timer and see how much you can do? So we're just trying to kind of appeal to the side of them that is maybe a little more playful or a little more competitive, or kind of like a positive character trait about them that we're trying to bring out, just to help them get done the thing we want them to get done. So it's just kind of more gentle. Again, it's just kind of redirecting their energy towards something that will eventually get us the desired outcome that we're all seeking. So again, these 4 types of discipline we discussed are boundary-based, empathic, behavior modification, and gentle discipline. So again, discipline fosters a more positive relationship between you and your child. It shows them that the world can be a fair place with consistent rules that are applied justly. Discipline also teaches your child that they are responsible for their behavior, and any negative consequences are attributed to their actions. Choosing discipline over punishment can be really hard. It takes more work to try to be learning and discovering what feelings they're having, what emotions they're having, trying to teach different skills, trying to help them come up with strategies to be successful in the areas that we want. It's a lot of work, and that alone can make it more difficult. And sometimes when our kids are misbehaving, it can be really frustrating. We can get really angry, and so in that moment it's so much easier to just go to your room, or yell at them, or to spank them, or whatever. I get it, but a lot of times when we just choose to do that, we lose the opportunity to teach, to come alongside, to build those connections, and to help them do better in the future. Okay, so let's now move on to addressing misbehavior in the moment, because again, that can be where the rubber meets the road. That can be the really hard time to do things. We have maybe these ideals of how we want to handle discipline, but in the moment, sometimes our ideals go out the window depending on our own emotional state. So the first thing I want us to be mindful of is just managing our own emotions. When we are dysregulated, we cannot help our child to become regulated. If we're out of control and yelling, we cannot help them to become more calm. So we're going to, as a byproduct, make the situation escalate, make it worse, possibly say something or do something that we regret, that doesn't help, and if anything, kind of hurts our relationship with our child more. So we want to use our own coping tools, coping strategies to help ourselves in the moment so that we can be the most controlled and make it the best experience for ourselves and for our child. So coping strategies, again, my favorite is deep breathing. And just take a few moments, just give yourself a moment to pause, to get your breath, maybe count to 10 or 5 or whatever, just to allow yourself to kind of compose yourself so that you can be the most in control of your words and your actions. And again, when we do this, this models to our kids how we want them to respond when they get really big emotions. Again, these are all opportunities for us to teach and to help our kids to build some skills that will ultimately help them to be successful in their lives and help them to do better in the future. So staying calm and managing our own emotions. Oops, there we go. Next one. Consider what need your child is trying to meet. It's helpful to remember that all behavior is communication, and when your child is making a poor behavior choice, it's helpful to think about what might be the underlying need in this situation. What might be the need that they're trying to get met through this behavior. And then, if possible, try to help them find appropriate ways to meet that need. So, for example, at school, we had a student who was being disruptive in class. They were making noises and gestures and jokes that just weren't appropriate for the classroom. And when talking about it, we just found out that they just really like making their classmates laugh. That's something that feels good. And there's nothing wrong with that, with being somebody who wants to make others laugh. It's just kind of knowing what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, knowing time and place. So for that student, we talked about maybe some school appropriate jokes and when it's okay to do those and when it's not. So when we found the underlying need there, we were able to kind of address it and then maybe meet it in a more appropriate way. All right, the next one is, when possible, working through your child's behavior in private. If you're in a public space, this means trying to pull your child off to the side somewhere so that you can address that in their behavior with just them. When we try to do discipline in front of others, it can lead to feelings of shame and embarrassment, and that can keep our kids kind of in an escalated or dysregulated state, which might make it take longer for them to calm down, or might make them not as receptive to what we're trying to do with them. And so, going off somewhere, off to the side, away from the watching eyes of others is really important, if you can do that. Also, addressing the behavior, not the child. When kids misbehave, it's important for them to know that it's their behavior we don't approve of, not them. It's their behavior that's wrong. They're not wrong. It's making sure they know this can help decrease feelings of shame that they might attach to discipline, and it can protect their self-esteem. I remember several years ago when my kids were young, we were at a Chick-fil-A in the play area, and there's this little boy, and he was misbehaving. I mean, he was pushing other kids. He was being unkind in his words and actions and all that kind of stuff. And his mom was addressing it, but she just kept saying to him, "You're bad, you're bad." And I remember thinking like, ooh, I mean, this was just a little kid, like a toddler. And the words that parents and caregivers speak to their kids are so important. And the words that we speak to them, it becomes their inner voice. It becomes the way they speak to themselves. So if you can imagine a child is hearing, "You're bad, you're bad," they start to internalize that, and then you start living into it, and then they start doing bad things because I'm bad, and so I do bad things. And so it's really important for us to be mindful of how we are speaking to our kids in those moments, making sure they understand that it's not them that we disapprove of, it's their behavior. We still love them, we don't love their behavior. So really making sure they know that they are still loved and accepted by us, even in those moments. And it's not them we disapprove of, it's just what they're doing. Okay. Oh, there we go. And then finally, we want to work with our child to help them manage their emotions and make decisions. So it's kind of goes back to that self-regulation. When our kids are in those elevated states, they can't be reasoned with. We can't necessarily teach them anything in those moments. And if we just try to, we're going to become more frustrated and angry. So if you're home and they're having a fit or yelling about something, just let it run its course. And then once they've calmed down, then you can talk a little bit more about what's going on. But providing them that space where they can go and just kind of take care of their feelings. And at school, we are really trying to help kids in this area. In several of our classrooms, and there's different areas around the building where we've created these safe spaces where when kids are feeling maybe just some of their big emotions, whether they're feeling angry or really stressed or really sad or worried or whatever the case may be, there's places where they can go in their classroom and in the building where they can take care of their feelings and kind of help grow in some of those self-regulation skills and strategies. So when they go there, they practice taking some deep breaths. They will name their feeling or feelings, because a lot of times we have more than one feeling at a time. They might use some coping tools or some sensory objects just to help them feel a little bit better. And then when they're done, they can kind of head back to the classroom. And I know some families are even kind of creating places like these in their homes, but it's just a place where they can go to feel safe and to kind of get some sense of calm and some sense of mastery over the way that they're feeling. When we teach our kids these self-regulation skills, it sets them up for so much success in the future, whether it's relationships with others, whether it's work, being able to be successful in work environments, or even in just getting things done. Being able to regulate ourselves is one of those really, really strong life skills that we need to help them to grow and develop in those now, and then it will really enhance their well-being, both for their own relationship within themselves and their relationships with others. So while these challenging moments in our kids' lives are not fun, they do provide us many opportunities for teaching and imparting various skills that will help them to be more successful in their life. So remember, kids are trying to learn how to handle their emotions as well as to understand how they fit into this world around them. This can lead to some behavior choices that aren't always the best. When we choose to discipline our children in a positive way, it helps them to grow and develop skills that will help turn into self-discipline as they get older. And again, then they are more in control and in charge of themselves and more likely to make some of those better, healthier choices and decisions. And that again works ourselves out of a job, which is, again, the goal of raising children. And so I know that parenting isn't easy, and especially this area of parenting isn't easy, especially if this form of discipline was not modeled to us growing up. So again, I want you at this point to take a few minutes and to think about what your current approach to discipline is. What is working for you? What is working for your children? And what isn't working? And are there any changes you'd like to make or things you'd like to try? I hope that these tips and strategies give you some ideas, or maybe just I don't know, just a little bit of direction as to maybe where you could potentially go with discipline with your children. Just again, the main theme of all this is that discipline is about teaching, and when our kids misbehave, our discipline approach can allow us to impart and teach various skills that will help them not just with future misbehavior, but also in their life in order to be more successful and to make better choices. All right. I look forward to hearing from you about what maybe you took away from this presentation. So again, please take a moment to fill out that Google form with your top 3 takeaways. And I hope that somewhere in this you got something that will be helpful to help discipline within your home be a little bit more of a positive experience. Thank you so much for joining me today.